This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody, to the Haulin Assets, or should I say welcome back. I am Craig, your host, and Chris is with me once again. But Chris, it's been a little while.
It has been a little while. I'm currently just in the last few days of my 2-week annual training with the Army National Guard, and I just haven't been able to step away as much as I was hoping to. It's been a little bit more time intensive and a little less flexibility than I was hoping for, and I was hoping to get an episode out last week, or this episode out last week, but obviously that didn't happen.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that our listeners are generally going to forgive you for taking a couple weeks off for your Army National Guard training. So I think we're okay.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. Well, today, Chris, we are going to get into a topic that is near and dear to your heart, and that is the mindset of an owner-operator. And we'll be getting into that in just a moment. But first, I want to remind everybody, of course, go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes. And you can go visit us on Facebook and elsewhere that we've talked about in previous episodes. I mean, we're all over the place. But those are the two major places I think that you can find us, ask us questions, and let us know how we're doing. Of course, in that case, you might as well just go leave a 5-star review on iTunes, right?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
All right. Well, like I said, today, this is really your favorite subject besides maybe saving money, and that is the mindset of an owner-operator. And you've got 10 questions that you want to go through. Why don't you set this up for us a little bit, Chris?
It is one of my favorite topics because there's really a big difference, and I can't overstate this enough, that even though it kind of sounds like a little nitpicky thing, just changing your mindset, but really the difference between a truck driver and a successful business owner, trucking company owner is really, it's a pretty big difference. Just how you think about things, how you view things, the kind of attitude that you have, and the skill sets that you need. So these 10 questions are kind of, questions you can ask yourself and kind of be introspective, I guess you would say, and look at your own self and ask yourself, hey, do I meet these criteria? Because are these skill sets that I have, are these characteristics that I exhibit? Because you really need to exhibit a good chunk of them if you want to be successful, because you're stepping into a little bit of a different playing field from being a company driver to being an owner-operator.
I suppose it's like anything else, to do it for someone else, to have somebody tell you what to do versus striking out on your own is always going to be a little bit different, right?
Yeah, it's just a different playing field, and you've got to behave differently and do things differently and think differently. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself running into some trouble. And so you've got to develop these characteristics. Now, I've come up with 10 of them, and there's obviously other things out there, but I feel like these are 10 of the most important ones. And you don't necessarily have to be, hitting it out of the ballpark with each one of these. You can, be good at some of them and be willing to learn and get better at others. And if you do that, you've really got a good chance of being successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have kind of gifts and talents and things that we're naturally inclined toward, but that doesn't mean that you can't develop other things as well to go along with them. Okay. So let's get into the 10. Now, you have ordered these from 10 to 1, meaning from least to most important. And as I was reading through the list, because you sent it to me ahead of time, I was pretty amazed, actually, by number 10, which I thought, hang on, that sure sounds like a number 1 to me. But let's talk about number 10. Do you constantly seek to improve? Like I said, that sounds like the most important thing in the world, but you're putting this at number 10. Tell me why.
Because it's one of those things you've got to be doing. It's a constant, just in my opinion, a given to a certain extent. You've got to be constantly improving. But the other skill sets I really think are kind of the more critical things, because some people can kind of step into something and they've got natural talent and natural ability and they're going to be able to make it work. Other people, you have to develop those talents a lot more. And I kind of feel like I fall in that category. You know, I wasn't born the sharpest tool in the shed, the most athletic person in the world. But over time, I've worked really hard at things, and I've been able to improve those. For some people, that number 10 piece, that seek to constantly improve it, may be higher up on the list. For others, you know, they may already have some of those talents and can kind of get by without such a big need to develop. So the list may be different for some people than it is for others.
Yeah, no, I guess that makes a lot of sense to me. So number 9 here is, do you accept change? Now, I find that an interesting wording, because I'm the kind of person actually who craves change. I love change, but would that be like going too far? Do you just have to be able to accept it?
Loving it's good. Actually, the more you love it and the more you can accept the change, the better. And so, yeah, loving it's good. And with business ownership, you have to be able to accept change, because things are always going to change, especially in the trucking industry. You look at where trucking was even 10 years ago, regulations change, everything changes. How you find freight has changed a lot. And if you can't adapt to those changes, you're really going to struggle.
Number 8, do you have a failure is not an option attitude? Expound on this one for me, because with this one, the thing that's coming to mind is, you know, sometimes it seems like you have to accept failure and move on to the next thing, but I guess this one's kind of confusing me a little bit.
And it is, because there are times when you need to kind of just cut your losses and move on. But I think in a lot of situations, people have a tendency to give up a little bit too soon. You know, as soon as some road bump comes in their path, they quit. And I think that's one of the big things that prevents people from even becoming an owner operator, is that you run into that difficult thing, or you're nervous about making that step, and so you just don't want to do it. And you know, especially in that jumping into the owner operator arena, you know, the first bank you go to doesn't want to give you a loan for a truck, and so you quit at that point. You say, "Oh, I'm just not going to be able to do it." The first insurance quote that you get is too high, and you can't make the down payment, so you quit. And I see a lot of guys doing that, and you just kind of have to go into it. Well, I'm going to find a way to make this work. And you've just got to be able to do that. So yeah, there are times when you need to be able to cut your losses and move on. You need to know when to cut your losses and move on. But I think it's more common for people to quit before they really need to quit than it is for people to kind of push too long. I'm kind of I would consider myself more in that other category. I'm probably too stubborn and don't. I really try to make things work, and I don't quit, and sometimes I take it too far.
I wonder if, as I'm going to go ahead and get philosophical about this a little bit. I wonder if it's kind of big picture versus small picture, where, you know, in the big picture, the question is, can I start and run a successful trucking company? And, you know, in that case, failure is not an option. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it work. But then there are the little tactical decisions, the smaller, you know, you might lose a battle, but that doesn't mean you've lost the war, right? Like you said, you didn't get that loan. Well, go try for another loan somewhere else until you succeed. And so I guess maybe that's where I was getting tripped up a little bit, is I see those little battles sometimes, and then I just need to step out and kind of see the full scope of it and say failure is not an option when it comes to the company itself that I want to start.
I think that's a really, really good way, concise way to put it. Absolutely. It's that the big picture, the big things, you don't want to quit early on. But yeah, the little things, you don't want to walk too far down a path on, financing a truck with a bank that's not going to give you a loan, and you need to cut your losses sooner. I've actually had that problem when we're in the process of building a commercial building right now. We've been working on this for over 2 years, and I went way too far down the path with one lender and kind of had put all my eggs in one basket and waited way too long to give up on them and move to somebody else. And I eventually kind of almost was forced to change tactics and got with another bank, and that one went so smooth and fast, it was crazy.
Well,
And
it sounds a bit like you're talking about number 7 here. Number 7 is, do you recover quickly from your failures? And you're talking about maybe being a little too stubborn and not moving on quickly enough. But then once you did decide to move on, it's taking action and moving on quickly from that failure and finding something that would help you succeed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be willing to fail. I mean, failing is going to happen in any part of your life. And as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, owner operator, whatever you want to call it, you're going to have your failures. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things. You just kind of have to, like water off a duck's back. It's one of those things that's going to happen. You just have to be willing and able to move on and not dwell on it and learn from it, kind of learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. Now, number 6 is, do you love a challenge? And are you willing to add some stress to your life, right? So do you love a challenge basically is just kind of saying, from what we've had in the previous few points here, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get knocked around by this whole process. Things aren't always going to go smoothly. And is that something that is going to make you kind of clam up and retreat from the world, or is it going to energize you and make you say, no, no, you're not going to knock me down. I'm going to make this work.
Yeah, business ownership it's tough. It's hard. I mean, you look on forums in the trucking industry when people talk about being an owner operator, being a company driver, you've got people on both sides of the aisle that, for some people it was the worst thing they ever did. For other people, it's the best thing they ever did. And I can tell you, no matter which side of the aisle you fall on, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. That's the differentiator between, the people who actually do it and don't are the ones who are willing to push through that challenge, accept the challenge, and kind of thrive in the challenge, because you're going to feel more pressure. You're going to feel more stress. And for some people, that stress just isn't worth it. So like you were kind of alluding to there a little bit earlier, that stress for some people, that stress is a motivator that makes them want to push harder and do better and work harder and figure something out, where other people, you get too much stress in it and it really just kind of makes you shut down. And so if you're one of those people that shut down under stress, or don't perform at your best under stress, then being an owner operator and business ownership might not be the right thing for you.
Now, this one in particular, this, do you love a challenge? Are you willing to take on the stress? This strikes me as, out of all 10, maybe the one that people would look at and most often say either, yep, that's me, or no, it's not, and I can't change. As you know, Chris, I am mortally terrified of spreadsheets and numbers and all that stuff, right? It's just not my forte. But I do feel like that is something that I could learn to handle, even if it's not something I learned to love, right? But when I look at something like, do you love a challenge? That's kind of changing a lot of who I feel like I am internally in a way. So I feel like this might be one of the tougher ones. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is one of the tougher ones. It's one of those things that's a little bit more ingrained in you, that is really kind of part of who you are. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't develop that kind of a characteristics or get better at it. We talked a little bit about in one of the previous podcasts, getting out of your comfort zone. And that's really what this is you may not love a challenge. That may not naturally be one of the things that you like to do. But as you do that more and more, and you do things that are hard for you or difficult for you, and you really break out of that comfort zone, oftentimes those things that are at one point in your life uncomfortable for you become something that are more of a strength and that you are comfortable doing. You may not necessarily enjoy it, but you can develop a certain level of competency at it. And I really think, that accepting a challenge or hitting facing a challenge head on is one of those things that you can get better at and learn to, if not enjoy, accept, and do well at.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, Chris, let's move on. We're halfway through, and we'll see how quickly we can burn through these other 5. But let's get to number 5. Do you take charge? How does that differ from some of the other ones that we've talked about already? Do you take charge?
Well, I think especially with business ownership, now we're starting to really get into the things that are not just important, but even really critical. The do you take charge is absolutely one of those things that's 100% critical, because you don't have anybody who's going to wake you up and tell you to start driving the truck and get to your delivery on time. You've got to be self-motivated. You've got to be the kind of person that, one, can get yourself out of bed, and two, get yourself to do the things that you may not necessarily want to do. You may not want to pick up the phone and call 10 shippers today to try to develop that direct to shipper relationship. You may not like to talk to people, and so that may not be something you like to do, but you really have to be that take charge. I'm going to do it. Nobody's going to tell me what to do, and I've got to know what to do, figure it out. Yeah, and you just have to, you can't sit on your seat and expect things to happen. You have to be the one that makes it happen.
I'm having high school flashbacks to all my teachers trying to lecture me about responsibility. Sounds a lot like that.
It is. And business ownership, I mean, to me, that's one of the beauties of it. You are the guy that you've got the authority. You get to make all the decisions. You live and die by your own decisions. And that's one of the things I love and absolutely thrive on in owning my own businesses.
Absolutely. Well, number 4, are you resourceful? Is this something you can develop, or are you just talking about finding resources to help you out? What does this mean?
I think it's kind of two-pronged. One, are you resourceful? Can you find things? Can you develop solutions to problems? It's really a problem solver in a lot of ways. So, kind of two-pronged. One, are you resourceful? Can you get the most out of what you have or what you can get? So, my grandpa used to always say, he had this little saying that he would say, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And so, that's kind of, can you do that with your trucking company, with your truck? Can you get the most out of your truck? Maybe you've got an older truck that needs a little bit of work, but are you mechanically inclined enough that you can make it work and make it run, manage your expenses? It's things like that. And then, also the problem solving, when you run into whether it's a mechanical issue or a financial issue, are you able to find solutions to overcome that problem? All
right. Well, number 3 is, like I said, the one that terrifies me the most. Do you understand your numbers?
It's an important one. And when I was kind of working through this, I started that question off with, do you know your numbers? And so I changed that one word from know to understand, because I think there's a huge difference there. And it's one of those things that makes a big difference as well. The difference between just knowing your numbers and actually understanding your numbers, because there's a lot more that goes into that. I may know what my cost per mile is, but do I understand how to use that number to make decisions in my business? Do I know how to pick out my maintenance costs, and are those maintenance costs too high? And if so, how do I lower them? Or do I know how to use my cost per mile to determine if I should take a load or not? We talked about that a couple episodes ago in episode 36. It's not just knowing that number, because calculating the number, is the easy part. And for some, it may not be so easy. It takes a little bit of work and some knowledge, but then to really be able to apply that knowledge into an understanding and knowledge and wisdom and use it to make your business better, that's a whole nother level of competency.
It's I joke about the spreadsheet thing for me, but it really does kind of seem like wizardry sometimes, where you just plug certain numbers in that are, this is hard data. This isn't, making a guessing game out of it. What your cost per mile is. And just by plugging those numbers in, you come to certain decisions that, like I said, for me, it kind of seems like wizardry, but it's really pretty cool to see how you do that. And I've enjoyed learning about that as we've gone on.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's the difference between the guys that just kind of scoot by and the guys who are able to make a profitable business, bring some more money home and or grow their business. I mean, if you want to be super profitable, if you want to have the kind of profits you need to be able to grow a business, you've got to be good at those things. You've got to understand your profit and loss, and you've got to understand, if my net income isn't where I want it to be, is it because I'm not bringing in enough revenue, or what are my individual expenses? Am I spending too much in a certain area? It's understanding those numbers and being able to apply them in different business situations that is really what takes you to that next level of success.
Well, speaking of money, Chris, number 2 is, do you manage your cash well? Now, this seems like it would go hand in hand with number 3, just knowing your numbers, but is money specifically different than the rest of your numbers?
Yeah, because there is a difference between profitability and cash flow, especially once you get up into bigger businesses. Sometimes businesses can be profitable but still fail because their cash flow is not keeping up with their profit. So they're making a profit, but maybe they've got too much debt and they don't have enough cash coming in to keep up with the debt payments, and so it can kind of cause issues. But the reason I've rated this one so high is because, we've talked about this in the past. What's the number one reason most businesses fail?
Cash flow.
Yeah, it's cash flow, and guys that don't manage their cash flow. So cash flow is a function of two things: the amount of money coming in and the expenses going out. And you want to maintain a positive cash flow. You have to maintain a positive cash flow. You can have short periods of time where you may have a negative cash flow, but in the long run, obviously, you've got to maintain that positive cash flow. So, maximizing your revenue, minimizing your expenses. One thing that I think is incredibly important, this is a mistake that I see a lot of guys make, is the use of debt sparingly. I think there are certain situations where you can use and should use debt in a business. If you can avoid debt, best case scenario. But a lot of us don't have the cash that we need to be able to buy a truck with cash and get on the road. So areas where I think, using that debt is okay. If you can't avoid it, buying a truck, buying a trailer, those big equipment expenses, and then maybe a little bit more on some of your startup costs. But other than that, you should, for the most part, try to avoid it. Especially when it comes to normal operating expenses. And that's where I see guys get into trouble, is they use debt to pay for normal operating expenses. So you shouldn't be using debt for your fuel. You shouldn't be using debt for your repair costs, unless it's like a major end item repair. Like if you have to repair your engine, it's going to be $30,000. There might be situations where it's okay to use debt for that kind of thing, but not your normal, hey, I blew a tire repair. My turbo blew out, I need to put in a new turbo. Those kind of things, you should develop enough of a savings so that you can cover those kind of costs. You shouldn't have to go into debt for those. And guys that I've seen go into debt for those kind of expenses, it's usually, one, not a good sign that their business is healthy in the first place, because that's kind of like a last ditch effort. And two, it's usually the thing that, the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's the last thing that kind of puts you under.
Well, this brings us, Chris, to number 1. This is the most important thing from your perspective as far as developing an owner-operator mindset, and that is, do you take action? This is an interesting one to me, because it's actually pretty simple, I think, compared to some of the other ones that we've talked about. And as I'm reading this, I'm interpreting this as simply saying, look, you can think about and plan about all you want, but eventually you're going to have to just make a decision and do something, right?
Yeah, and I see this as a common problem, whether it's in the business world. I see this in my experience in the military, all over the place. I see a lot of the times people just try to study things for too long. They try to collect as much data as they possibly can, and they either don't take action because they're waiting for a perfect solution, or they wait too long to take action, and they kind of miss out on an opportunity. So the thing that one of the things that the military has taught me that I think is a really valuable life lesson is that it's oftentimes better to execute a good plan today than wait to execute a perfect plan tomorrow. Because a lot of the times that time that you've waited has made it so an opportunity passes you by, and you're just better off going now and doing something rather than doing nothing, which is oftentimes what happens when you try to wait for that perfect opportunity. You just end up doing nothing, which gets you nowhere.
I couldn't have said it any better. That's perfect. So, Chris, any final thoughts on these top 10 things from an owner-operator mindset that you want to finish up on?
Kind of like I was saying at the beginning, it's one of those, baseball analogies. Craig's a big baseball fan. You're not going to knock it out of the park with each one of these 10 characteristics. I've got my characteristics that I'm stronger at and that I'm better at, but it goes down to that number 10. The ones that you haven't fully developed at this point, learn, get better, constantly improve, and at some point you'll be ready to make this leap into owner-operator, if that's what you want to do. For some people, that's going to be the right thing in their life. For others, not so much. If you don't feel like you're there right now, work on it till you're ready to take action. You feel like you've got those skill sets that you need, and don't ever wait for them all to be perfect, but just get a good solid base under you, and you'll be ready to go.
And frankly, if you do want to improve and learn about some of these things, we've had 36 episodes before this one, many of which deal with just these things on the list, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of we're preaching to the choir when we're talking about constantly learning, because the majority of the people that are listening to this podcast, especially if you made it all the way up to episode 37, you want to learn, you want to get better. And, that's, you're taking action, at this point, because you're learning, you're improving, you're kind of setting that foundation that you need so that you can be a successful owner operator.
All right, Chris. Well, let's call it there. Let's cut and run. And just thank you, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate your support. We know that you've got a million other things that you could listen to. We appreciate you spending time with us. And if you do appreciate what we do, like I said at the top of the show, go to iTunes or whatever it's called now, Apple Podcasts or something, and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy what we do. We would really appreciate that, and we would love to hear from you about any questions or comments that you have regarding the show. So, Chris, I guess I will see you next week then.
We'll see you then.
Hold up just a sec. I got a jet flying over.
Yeah, if we were recording at night, I'd have helicopters. We got to figure out a way to make this work, because I'm right next to the airfield, and helicopters are flying over all the time. They're quiet right now, but you could have jets. I could have helicopters. It'd be the sound of freedom in the background as we're recording this podcast.
Can we have the Top Gun theme just underlaying this entire episode?
We probably should.